Welcome to The Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this episode, which is brought to you with generous support from Clarivate, we'll be diving into what's currently at the top of everyone's mind, artificial intelligence and libraries. My guest is Fran Buckland, Vice President of Product Management at Clarivate. Fran and I discuss how AI is transforming the research workflow using Clarivate's Web of Science Research Assistant as a prime example. Importantly, we talk about how to prevent human expertise from getting lost in the sauce and what the library's role should be in selecting, implementing, and advising on AI initiatives. We'll also cover the critical concepts of trust, transparency, and ethical design in AI product development. Okay, Fran, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Bill. Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, our pleasure. So why don't we start with a brief introduction? Can you talk briefly about your role at Clarivate?
Sure. So I'm a vice president of product management here at Clarivate. I've been managing the product development and the business for the Web of Science, but I've also been supporting kind of AI development across all of our academic brands, so ProQuest and Ex Libris. I've been at Clarivate for about 7 years, and I'm based in London in the UK.
Excellent. So catch us up on Clarivate's go-to-market strategy as it, sought to introduce AI-based offerings. Can you give us a brief history of that? How did that strategy evolve?
Sure. So within Web of Science, we've actually been using kind of more traditional AI ML technology for a really long time.
Hmm.
We've launched various kind of features on Web of Science, such as enriched cited references, which classifies the citations into different types, and where they're featured in the article that uses an AI and ML method. Obviously, when generative AI came along, we were really keen to utilize that new technology and look at how it kind of could support researchers who use the Web of Science and the products across Clarivate. We know, obviously, within Clarivate, our data offers, really valuable insights that customers can't access without the help of AI models. That we've got so much data, and finding, the right information out of that data is one of the things that we do at Clarivate. So it makes sense to kind of use these new types of technologies. So the strategy at Clarivate, and more specifically around generative AI, is that we have worked to develop a generative AI and academic AI platform. And that really it's kind of a technology backbone that enables kind of accelerated and consistent deployment of AI capabilities across all of the products that we have here within academia and government. So all of the products, not only Web of Science, but also ProQuest, also Ex Libris. And it's got a technology element, which has, benefits for us in terms of helping, choose the provider of the generative AI model we use, and understanding that from a technology and data security perspective, but also helps from a product management perspective. So understanding, how you can implement AI responsibly, to make sure the output is quality, to make sure you're thinking about users' privacy when you're deploying these types of technologies. So we've been really well supported through this kind of centralized backbone that's been built up in academic and government segment within Clarivate. And finally, the other thing that's really impacted our AI strategy within Clarivate is the community. We've got an AI advisory council set up now, meets on a regular basis to kind of inform best practice and guidelines. And that's made up of members of the community, the librarian community, who have a voice and expertise in this space to be able to help us better understand how our customers, how librarians are using AI and how they're thinking about it. And so we can make sure we develop products in a responsible way.
Excellent. I was just curious, out of curiosity, as you were developing or at that community of the AI Advisory Council, what were some early learnings for you all there, in terms of feedback from the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think we will probably touch on this later, but I think we're hearing both excitement about the potential of this new technology, but I think there's also a quite well understood potential drawbacks and concerns about the use of technology. Things like
Right.
bias and hallucinations come up often, and also the interesting things on the role of librarians and how that's been shaped by this new technology, and how librarians are thinking about it within their
Hmm.
universities and thinking about how they're going to implement this. So all of those things were really kind of fundamental things that we were learning about at the start.
Excellent. So I'm curious about sort of the research workflow essentially. I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts on finding that right balance between enhancing efficiency and sort of the potential disruption of traditional research workflows within using generative AI.
Absolutely. I mean, our perspective, I think there's a certain amount of disruption that can be really useful, but we also
Mm.
need to be cautious of, potentially dangerous kind of use cases. For example, I think I personally think, potentially AI writing research papers. Obviously, it can be really useful for helping those for whom English isn't their first language, write in a more fluent English, research paper if they want to. But I think having those real disruptors could potentially damage things in terms of research integrity and other pieces. So we've really focused on efficiency, but driving efficiency in different ways than we've been able to before with traditional AI. So I mentioned the language translation, for example. The Web of Science at the moment, the core collection is all in English, and you search it in English and all of the content is in English. But if you're a researcher for whom English isn't your first language, there's huge potential in being able to run a search in your native language and get results back in your native language that are well translated, and that's going to drive efficiency in a way that we weren't able to do before, and that can be quite a disruptive thing, because it does make you far better potentially at your job than you might have been doing before. So I think, yeah, we are focusing on those kind of efficiency, those efficiency pieces, but I think in a way that sometimes there is an element of disruption to it. If you kind of get that right, I think
Hmm.
you can really change the way people are interacting with technology to do their roles.
Yeah, I was thinking of the term disruption in the sense that, like, researchers would need to relearn a process, or a traditional workflow would be shed in favor of this new piece of technology kind of thing.
Exactly. And I think we've got really good examples of that kind of disruption, definitely in the products that we've been looking at. Examples would be, I think, things like literature review and the way that's conducted. There's huge potential for AI. And we always talk about kind of human in the loop and data informed
Mm.
decision making, right? So,
Yep, yep.
what AI is really good at is making sense of large amounts of data, which we have in Clarivate and we have on Web of Science. And so those kind of things, like a literature review, like being able to spot patterns in data and those kind of things, are the spaces in which, like you say, we can be really disruptive. And those use
Mm.
cases, I think we will see, we're investing in, and I think we will see huge leaps forward in the future of how researchers are interacting with technology to do those types of tasks.
Right, sure. So I think one of the main concerns that keeps popping up, in this early stage of AI is, will it circumvent that learning process and critical thinking? And I'm wondering, in what ways have you seen AI actually helping critical thinking, and how does this show up? How do you make sure that part of it shows up in a product like Web of Science?
Yeah. And I think this is really interesting, because I feel like if AI is used in the right way with the right kind of guidance, we can actually support the development of critical thinking, and it can improve critical thinking. And actually,
Mm.
it makes critical thinking a more important skill that researchers and people need to have, because these are, non-deterministic systems. They need people who can understand the limitations of them and who can kind of interrogate them in the right way and
Mm.
understand how they can be used. So it's really important that we do support that. And I think actually the way we've developed the Web of Science Research Assistant, which is our new generative AI offering that we launched in September, we actually learned a lot about our approach to helping researchers further their critical thinking skills from another Clarivate product, Alethea, which was acquired by Clarivate last year. And Alethea is like an academic coach which supports the kind of learning process of students.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, when generative AI first exploded on the scene, there was a huge concern about students being able to use tools like ChatGPT to write essays, and they're just going to get answers from these types of generative AI tools. But Alethea is really clever in the sense that it sets a text and then it kind of guides the student through it and asks them questions about it and helps them kind of learn through the text or whatever they're looking at, and it kind of interrogates them as they're going along, so they pick up that kind of learning process, and they're learning better through that generative AI, and that really informed how we were thinking about critical thinking in Web of Science, right? So the way WAS Research Assistant works is it helps users to kind of have those critical thinking skills. We always tell, for example, users when we're giving them a response from the chat on WAS Research Assistant, how that chat was generated, what the search result was. You can see the abstracts of the papers side by side with the response, so you can check to see whether the responses changed the answer significantly. So we're really trying to kind of help build a tool that builds that kind of critical thinking about AI into the tool, so it's helping those researchers build that skill as they're using it.
Yeah, that's really nice. I think that's sort of like almost like a reverse prompt. I mean, the product is prompting the user to remember to do these things as they're working through the process.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in a similar vein, research integrity comes up a lot with AI implementations. So I'm wondering how you've created protections around research integrity, in Web of Science.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, research integrity is the heart of what we do every day with Web of Science, because obviously in the core collection on Web of Science, every journal, book, or conference is part of our editorial selection process. So we only include the kind of, the high quality, impactful, and trustworthy journals in that process. And
Hmm.
the challenges around research integrity have been around for a really long time. They're not new. Paper mills and
Right.
citation rings and everything existed way before generative AI. They've made research fraud easier. I think generative AI and the developments in AI has definitely made it easier for that to happen. But yes, we are definitely thinking about research integrity as one of the main things when we're thinking about building our products. So the research assistant only uses the core collection content. So the way we use a method called retrieval augmented generation, which basically means that the answer that the tool gives you is only restricted to that content that has been selected for the Web of Science. And that selection process is always our kind of first frontline guard against poor quality research practices and research fraud. So we will only be able to give answers to questions that are based on that kind of selected, high quality view of research. And I mentioned the use cases as well. Earlier when we were talking about critical thinking, we're also really thinking about the ethics of the types of use cases we're looking at as well, right? We want to make sure that we're building products and building tools that help users get more out of the Web of Science, in potentially a disruptive manner if it's speeding up the way that they're conducting a literature review. But we've been really, really thinking about, making sure that we are operating in an ethical way in the terms of the way users are using the tool and the types of things that they're getting out of it.
Excellent, thank you. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, but AI again, has been carefully scrutinized for bias and hallucinations and lazy shortcuts and so on. And I'm just very curious about how, like, as a researcher is working their way through Web of Science, and results are showing up. How can you talk about how you've helped researchers feel secure in within the with AI within the walls of the product? In terms of the results that they're getting from their searches. That, and I guess maybe paranoia is not the right word, but that they feel secure in the information that they're getting back. How do you sort of build that trust?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that that's at the heart of this kind of product development. Really, is where you is what you can do to help researchers in that area. So I will start by saying that these systems are non-deterministic, and I think
Yeah.
that there is a challenge innate with that we can never be 100% certain that there's going to be no bias or hallucinations, but there are definitely ways that we can support making sure that they are restricted as much as possible, and we do all of those within Clarivate. So our academic AI platform, as I mentioned before, for example, we have a gold standard question and answer sets that we test, and we use those where they're applicable across all of our products. So we're sharing
Hmm.
knowledge, sharing advice between the different products. There's also other methods that you can use to try and ensure the responses are semantically correct. And the third thing I will say about this is that, as I mentioned before, helping if the tools helping researchers enable those critical thinking, skills, and trying to be as transparent with the tool as possible. So, for example, where it runs a search and generates a response from it, we're transparent to the user about what search has been run. You can see the full set of search results, and then you can see the ones that were picked to generate the response, and you can see which bits of those ones were used to generate the response. It's as transparent as we can make it in terms of you
Hmm.
as a user being able to kind of interrogate that response. So I think through that transparency as well, we're really trying to educate users and support them in the use of this technology as much as possible.
Excellent. All right. So I'd like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about what, the library's role has been and should be in selecting and implementing and advising on AI initiatives on campus. And very curious to see what your perspective has been on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been, as I mentioned, speaking to librarians about this. Even from right from the
Right.
start of generative AI, coming onto the scene. Actually, one of the things that's informed us most recently is in September we launched a Pulse of the Library report.
Hmm.
Um, it's got both a survey and qualitative interviews, and we've got more than 1,500 respondents from around the world, covering academic, national, and public libraries. So that was really interesting in seeing kind of, have a lot of one-on-one conversations, but seeing that kind of broader view about how our library community are thinking around implementing AI and advising on AI. Couple of things that came out of that I found most interesting. The first one is, and actually this first bit isn't actually that shocking. Most respondents, most libraries have some kind of AI plan.
Hmm.
One thing that they're thinking about is either evaluating or planning some kind of AI integration. So we know that this is an area where people are interested, where people are actively working on, and it seems like it is a top kind of tech priority. Amongst our respondents as well. So, the next 12 months, most libraries are looking into adopting some kind of AI technology on campus. I think the interesting thing that we were thinking about was, AI, and actually how it can help support library missions. So really thinking about what your mission is within the library, whether that's, whether you're looking specifically at student learning, whether you're thinking about
Yeah.
excellence in the research space, whether you want to support search and discovery and content discoverability. So really thinking about what the mission of the library is and what's important kind of will help guide and shape how and how and what types of use cases you want to support as a librarian, and what should be the priority there. So I think we've seen that librarians' experience is really key to ensuring that AI enhances rather than truly kind of disrupts those core functions. They need to be
Yeah.
thinking about how these types of AI can really support that. And I think one really interesting area of example, for example, is AI helping with kind of core librarian tasks. If you're looking at developing students' literacy skills, or your focus is supporting early career researchers in complex literature reviews, or whatever that focus is, thinking about how these tools can help support it. And I think the final point was kind of something I mentioned earlier about, I think we can all see the promise and pitfalls in AI adoption, and I think we found out, I think it's about 42% thought that AI could automate routine tasks, so freeing librarians for more strategic and creative activities. So there's huge promise in this technology, and I think we're all really excited about how it can transform the way we work. But then there's also a kind of, pragmatism and inherent kind of, we know that there are also some pitfalls, as we mentioned earlier, and how can we address those?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. So moving beyond that, how do you think this really could change or elevate the library's role on campus with respect to AI? What are some of the ways your library partners are establishing themselves as authorities on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as we've seen, as AI is becoming kind of more integrated into all areas of academic life, actually, what's really crucial is librarians are supporting that kind of, but firstly upholding integrity in research, and also in upholding the kind of learning mechanisms and supporting learning.
Yeah.
And I think libraries are really well positioned to do that in a way that other stakeholders in this potentially aren't as well positioned. So libraries are really essential for helping their students, helping faculty, everyone to use these types of tools really effectively, and also understand their potential ethical limitations and some of the implications. So where we've seen our librarian communities really thrive is where they've been really looking at kind of AI literacy. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
helping students and researchers understand those kind of pitfalls. I think looking at offering kind of guidance for students and faculty about where you can use trusted AI tools, what what should be useful, and what kind of training that they need on how to use those tools effectively. So those kind of things are really the kind of the way that we can see the librarian role developing on campus and for students.
Excellent. Um, yeah, and then finally, looking ahead, can you talk about, where you're seeing further development of AI in academic settings? What phase potentially will we be entering next, and what should we be paying particular attention to?
Yeah, so this is the really exciting stuff, right? It's I think there's loads and loads of places that AI at the moment hasn't kind of reached into the various academic settings, but that have huge potential. So I mean, aside from more integration into the existing academic solutions that we already know, I think we'll see more more and more kind of industry standards on kind of guidelines and best practices that we're already seeing kind of being shared amongst the community about ethical AI use and transparency and minimizing bias. I think we will see an increase in AI literacy, as we mentioned earlier, and skill development, and it will
Right.
become over time a part of academic life. I think one thing that is really interesting, I'm certainly quite interesting as a future potential use case, is the use of AI in research assessment. So we talked about the research process, but
Hmm.
actually a huge area, time-consuming area that relies on a lot of data that needs to be interpreted is research assessment. And so, how can AI kind of support research officers in thinking about their strategic direction and their collaborators, and how they can gain insights about the data that they have on the university in order to kind of define and then improve that the strategy and the mission that they have. I think that's going to be really, really interesting, and it's an area that we're exploring within Clarivate, within the launch of our new Web of Science Research Intelligence system as well.
Hmm.
We're looking at an AI assisted analytics tool for the research office. So that's going to be something that we're really interested in the development of. So I think there's huge potential for AI to support in that kind of place where, like I say, there's large data sets, and obviously always need humans to help interpret and understand that data. But I think pulling out insights in the huge amount of data that you have in a university about how performance can be improved is one thing that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have a timeline that you can speak to regarding that assessment tool that you're working on, or?
Yeah, so we're launching at the moment to a set of development partners, and it's going to be released more generally, a first early adopter release next year.
Excellent. Well, looking forward to that. Well, Fran, thank you so much for joining us on the program. This was fun.
Thanks. Yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks, Bill.
You just heard from Fran Buckland, Vice President of Product Management at Clarivate. This episode was brought to you with generous support from Clarivate. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.